Welcome back to the Gruber Morning Show. This is the Tesla Roadster podcast that we do every week Wednesday. I'm Pete Gruber.
I'm Mark Schaffner. Good morning and welcome to the podcast.
What we have behind us here is, again, an AI-generated image of a Tesla Roadster. And I asked it for a low shot this time, so it's sitting fairly low. Looks like the photographer probably got wet because there's water in the front. But since it was AI, nobody got wet, right?
That's right.
Now, Mark pointed out a flaw. What was that, Mark, you saw in the car?
Well,
So you want to show that?
yeah, I'm okay showing that one. If you'll highlight that front hub, that eighth and ninth spoke down on the lower right quadrant of the hub look really, really odd for a round wheel.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not perfect yet, but especially considering the Roadsters only have 7 spokes on their wheels.
Right. So the colors are interesting, blended kind of a sunset type color in there. But yeah, so we hope you enjoy it. Those of you that are on Instagram are still seeing a green screen. We realize that. We had a few people yesterday jump from Instagram over to YouTube, and you can get the full experience there as we pop up images and such. Looks like we got some questions coming in.
Yeah, and George from the Watch Rich Rebuilds channel has joined us. George, you're one of our favorite people, and I'm so glad to see you here today. He says, "Good morning, guys."
Yeah, thanks for joining us. And looks like we've got Seth Love says, "Not a bad picture." Yeah, you know, these AI images are always intriguing, interesting, stunning, and yeah, we're enjoying them.
By all means, you know, if you don't know the intricate details of a car like this Roadster, the lines on it look perfect, and it's a beautiful picture of a car that resembles a Roadster.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I wanted to start with today was we asked the user community, Tesla Roadster user community, since Tesla has been regionalizing service centers and some of them no longer accept Tesla Roadsters, we started we requested from the owners that you guys tell us where the service centers are, and at the same time we reached out to corporate and asked them, is there a list available yet? And their response was, you know, it's a bit dynamic right now. It keeps on changing, so there is no list that they can publish yet. But what we've started to do was collect this list of service centers, and they're posted on a Facebook website called Tesla Roadster Owners Group. Any of you that have a Roadster, feel free to join. The original basis of the group was that only owners could join, but if you give me a compelling reason as to why you want to join, you're about to buy one, you used to have one, we may bend those rules.
I think so. You know, one of the best things that Tesla said, is that they gave an email out for people who need to get Roadster service. And so while I was a little disappointed to see that the list is still dynamic to the point that Tesla doesn't want to publish it, I think that email will be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
You want to share that for people?
Yeah, it's Roadster Service NA for North America at Tesla.com. And it was never intended to be the type of email where, you know, a lot of traffic would get routed through it, but it is it's an attempt by Tesla to remain in contact with their original Roadster owners and community. And most people are pretty impressed with the results they get with that email address.
Yeah, that's good. So for any of you who have Roadsters and need service, at least that's a good place that you can go to start with. They'll help. What they've said is that they'll help route you to the right service center for the work that needs to get done.
And Jesse, if you could pop up the image of the service centers. And you know what? I just realized I don't have that here. All right, never mind, Jess.
It's on the archive. I can check.
It's probably not in the archive. It's in the previous session, if you can check there. The latest service center that was added was by a owner in Houston, Texas, that finally got a green light from Tesla for his 3.0 battery upgrade. It's a customer whose car had been here years ago, and so his battery went dead, and he ended up deciding to go with the 3.0 upgrade instead of repairing it this time. But he said that Houston, Texas North, the service center there, is still repairing Roadsters and is also installing batteries. The list keeps on growing, and we encourage you to let us know if you've had any successes.
Well, I think I found it. Are you talking about the Facebook post?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, let me pull that up.
Yeah, there we go. And you can see some of the areas there that are now listed as being Roadster service centers. And I would suggest that you refer to this list, because there's nothing more frustrating like a North Carolina customer that went to his service center 15 miles away only to be turned away and told that he's got to go 150 miles north to a different service center. Yeah, I mean, check the list or check with your service center to make sure that they can accept your Roadster before you drive it down there, especially if it's a charge problem and you have very few miles left, and by the time you get there, they can't repair it for you.
Yeah, I would think that'd be one of the most frustrating things, to know that you have 60 miles of charge, you drive 35 miles to get to a service center, only to find out that that service center can't take your car.
Yeah. What the good news is, though, is that Tesla continues to support the Roadster. We're seeing some parts now that are beginning to pop up at the service centers. Someone in Delaware bought some letters for the back of the Roadster and also the script, the Roadster script, which is good news, because a lot of these parts are no longer in production.
Right.
So we know that Tesla has been adding to their inventory because they buy some of this stuff from us, like the fans, for example.
Yes, that's exactly right. So Seth Love on YouTube has a comment for us again. He says, "I'd like to open a repair shop for all EVs, especially Teslas."
We get that request quite often, Seth, and we are not in a position to open up or to support with any franchise activity. Fundamental reason is we're short-staffed ourselves, and there's just no bandwidth to either work on a franchising arrangement, open other service centers, or provide training. We've had requests from people all over the world, actually, that want to send people to our service center to spend time on an internship and get trained. And we're just so busy at this point that it's not available yet. We haven't ruled it out, though.
Yeah, I think it could occur in the future. And the good news is, for people like yourself wanting to open a repair shop, boy, the EV market is brand new. It's underserved. It seems like a great opportunity. Even if you're not able to do something like work with us directly, over time, I think it's something that you have a great chance of being successful doing.
Yeah. Jesse, I've got a picture, VIN 1234. And the reason I'm throwing this up is we posted this on Facebook earlier this year, and we said, "We've been waiting for this Tesla Roadster for a long time and knew since all roads lead to Rome, it would eventually show up. It came in from a Florida service center with a failed brick battery, which will soon be back on the road. It's VIN number 1234, of course, the only one in existence."
Of course.
Yeah. And an interesting story about this Roadster, we got it running, we got it repaired, we recovered the battery, but it ended up having a paint protection film on it from the factory. So it was, I forget what year it was about 12 or 13-year-old PPF. And it was a Roadster that spent some time sitting outside, which is really rough on PPF because of the ultraviolet.
Sure.
And what we learned is that the radiant red color is the roughest on PPF for whatever reason. Its absorption of UV is different than perhaps the other colors. So what ended up happening is some of the areas, the PPF panels were clouded. And it's not uncommon to remove PPF, either reapply or leave it off. But in this case, the PPF had aged so much that the adhesive layer crystallized and bonded with the clear coat. And in that scenario, there's not much you can do to get it off without damaging the paint. So we ended up having to repaint a portion of the front clip and some of the parts in the rear. And the lesson that we learned there was for the community, and we put out a Facebook post on this, don't let your PPF age too much. They say that 8 years is about the maximum life. After that, if it begins to crystallize and bond with your clear coat, then you've got a paint job that is going to be in your future. And if you're thinking, well, I'll just leave the PPF on it, the older first generation PPF apparently began to cloud as it aged. So your look isn't going to be exactly what you're looking for. So anyway, that was the, and I don't think we have, yeah, we do have a picture. If you can throw up 4 images -2 there, Jesse, you can see the amount of work that surrounded the removal of this PPF and then the paint that took place later. Yeah, there we go. It's that radiant red right in the center there. And that's one of our detailing experts. You can see all of his stuff that he brings to detail a car like this. And we ended up making this car look virtually brand new by the time we got done. And I think in this case, the customer did not reapply PPF. They were, there are ways you can protect your paint. You can do the ceramic coating route. Certainly, if you keep it indoors, you keep it inside your garage, that definitely helps as well. And the advantage then for PPF becomes that it protects the paint from rock chips, especially in the front. Instagram, Adriano Bordignam asks, tell us about your background. Did I work for Tesla? Well, no, I did not work for Tesla. I've been in the electronics business for many decades, since I was a kid, actually. The short version of this is, 40 years ago, I started the Gruber companies, and one of them is the Gruber Power Services division, which services uninterruptible power systems, lighting inverters, basically. And what I realized in 2013 when I got my first Tesla Roadster, the electronics in the cars, the EVs, are identical to what's in an uninterruptible power system. And we were highly skilled on working on those, so we migrated into repairing Tesla Roadsters initially. And anyway, that's where Gruber Motor Company got its start. I'm asked often, how do you pivot or change or get into this kind of EV repair space? And most people assume incorrectly that you will come from a mechanic background. And we found that that just simply isn't the case, especially in the independent space. With an electronics background, you stand a much better chance of being able to do the types of repairs that we end up having to do in the independent space. And what I mean by that is if you're working for a dealership, like Tesla, for example, and you've got a massive parts inventory and parts room, then yeah, you can be a mechanic and you can module swap and have a combination of low-tech auto and basic module swapping. But if you're in the independent EV repair space, you're not going to have that big inventory and that large parts room. So you have to repair things right down to component level. You have to open up the batteries and find the fault. You have to find the circuit boards or find what's wrong on the circuit boards. And that's going to require a whole different set of skills than a highly trained master mechanic used to working on mechanical things. Now you have to have an electronics background. And a double E is a perfect fit for this type of work.
Well, by all means, the ICE mechanics, if you're going into the internals and diagnosing down to the component level, say a transmission goes out, well, you can take it down to a transmission shop. They'll tear apart your transmission, buy all the component parts that they need to put it together. They're going to be things like, gears and metal
Fluids
components and fluids,
seals,
and
bearings,
seals and bearings. Yeah, all of those kinds of things. And great. That's why the mechanics are so good. They're very skilled. They know how to do that. The mechanics don't know anything about electronics. We have our engineer just telling us this morning that, hey, I've figured out this piece, this chip that has gone bad on this particular component for a Roadster that we've been trying to reverse engineer for the last several months.
Right.
It was a different version of one of the boards that the Roadster has. I think it was off of a 2.0 Roadster where we had figured out the 1.5. That required not only somebody with electrical engineering capabilities, but somebody who had really good troubleshooting capabilities. It's like being a mechanic for a circuit board.
Yeah. Problem-solving skills is definitely something that both of these disciplines have in common. But where it breaks down and stops is what kind of equipment are they using to do fault analysis. in the mechanical world, it's calipers and dials
Yeah.
and torque wrenches. In the electronic world, it's curve tracers, signal generators, oscilloscopes, DVMs, digital voltmeters. And you have to be able to understand what all of those components on those circuit boards are, what they do, and how they interplay. And then reading schematics, for example, that's pretty
Right.
cryptic as well. So you stand a much better chance coming from the electronics background into EV repair than you do from the mechanical background. Eventually, the schools are going to understand this, and the automotive schools like UTI, for example, will begin to offer and branch into electronics.
Yeah, and this really applies not just to the Roadsters. This is going to apply to any independent shop that wants to work on vehicles. Tesla is famous or infamous, as the word may be, about holding back parts for people that aren't the registered owners of their cars. And that goes for all of the models of Tesla. And so it's sometimes quite an adventure to get parts, even for a Model S or something like that.
So yeah, the component level troubleshooting is definitely an important asset if you're starting an independent repair shop. It looks like George with Watch Rich Rebuilds channel, that's his name on YouTube, is asking, is that Roadster windshield? And Jesse, if you can pop up VIN number 1234 again. George is actually pretty astute, and he recognized something that is an issue on Roadster windshields. If that picture, there we go. Now, if you notice all those little black dots, it's the intent of that is to hide some of the seams that are down below the windshield where the dash merges, and it covers it up. The original Roadster windshields appear to be out of production now. We can't find them anymore. Tesla doesn't have them anymore. The good news is that the Tesla Roadster was a Lotus Elise. 7% of the Tesla Roadster is still Lotus Elise, like some of the suspension components. And fortunately, the windshield is a Lotus Elise windshield.
So as part of that 7% then?
It's part of the 7%. However, it does not have the clearance or the window that a Tesla Roadster windshield has, so that the VIN is highly visible. Now, it's somewhat visible. The dots on a Lotus Elise windshield come up a bit higher. They cover about half of the VIN tag. And the only time that's going to become a problem for you is if you get pulled over by a police officer and they try to verify registration to your car by looking at the VIN tag. And they may grumble and complain, well, how come this isn't visible? But it does become a problem only at that time.
So that means that this windshield is likely a Roadster windshield then, correct?
It is indeed, yes. Yep. We have some cars over next door where it's difficult to read the VIN numbers because of those dots being in the way. It's
Very
up a
interesting.
bit higher.
And that, and I know this is just kind of an esoteric thing. That B that's like 8 characters in, you have the 100, 1, 2, 3, 4, but just before that is the letter B.
Yeah.
That is the year of the Roadster. If it's a 2008, it's going to be an 8. An 09 is going to be a 9. A 2010 is going to be an A. This Roadster, which is going to be a 2011, would be a B.
A B, okay, all right. We popped up the VIN decoder. And by the way, if you're interested in getting a copy of it, it's on our website under the Gruber Motors website under newsletters. And there's a newsletter that documents the VIN decoder. And all of those digits do have a meaning, yeah. All right. We've got another picture here, Jesse. Let's see if I can find that. No, I guess not. All right. I was going to tell you about a great video that just popped up on YouTube, and it's regarding J.B. Strobel. And it's well done. Oops, it looks like my computer went crazy on me here.
That video on J.B. Strobel, you can find it on YouTube while Pete's finding it on his computer. This talks a lot about J.B. Strobel being the magician in the background, as it were, and the guy who actually made Tesla work. In fact, the video goes on to contend that there would be no Tesla if there was not a J.B. Strobel. One of the things the video highlights, that as I watched it, that I did not know, J.B. Strobel is the one who was playing with the 18650 cells on lithium ion cells and wondering what would happen if you put like thousands of these cells together and then stuck them into a car.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where he was and what he was thinking about at the time that he talked to and met Elon.
Mm-hmm.
And JB is really the guy who introduced Elon to the T0 and the guys at AC Propulsion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, JB, his dad, by the way, is one of our customers. But one of the early stories about JB is apparently he's always been interested in tinkering, taking things apart. And there was a golf cart at one point in time that his mom said that he wanted to repair and get running, and that was his first introduction, she feels, to electric vehicles.
Right. My understanding from the video was he pulled it out of the junkyard. Somebody had thrown it away.
Right.
And
Yeah.
he thought, this is good. I'll bet I could get this thing fixed.
And there was a 14-year relationship with JB and Elon. He was his right hand. He was the chief technical officer, CTO. Later on, replaced by also a competent, very competent engineer, Drew Baglino, who you've probably seen on the shareholder meetings. And most recently, JB, well, when he left Tesla, it was about 4 years ago or so. He continued in the business by starting a company called Redwood Materials, which is a battery recycling operation. And again, he saw the opportunity. He knew that these batteries should not go in landfills, and found a way to actually create a 0% waste stream. So they recycle virtually everything on lithium-ion battery packs, and those are everywhere now, from tools to cell phones to e-books to cars and all of that. And most recently, JB is back on the Tesla board of directors.
Yeah, he's joined the board of directors again. A couple more nuggets I pulled out of this video that I thought were notable. First, for many years, JB was essentially the interface between Tesla employees and Elon. Elon is known as a mercurial guy, hugely passionate about his job, and as such can be very, very difficult to work for. And JB was the buffer, the voice of reason, the one who could distill all the passion that was coming from Elon and package it and present it to the employees in a way that they would understand and be able to work with. And vice versa. When the employees would come, he would be able to filter that information and get it back to Elon. On a sadder note, JB's introduction for Redwood Materials is partly part of his wife's legacy. His wife was riding a bicycle down the road in Nevada, and she at the time owned a small business that was taking metal from things like electronics and was recycling them and putting them into jewelry and selling them online. She was sadly killed by a car that possibly a drunk driver veered across the road while she was riding a bicycle and hit her.
Right.
And Redwood Materials, part of the inspiration for finding Redwood Materials and the recycling efforts that it has is in memory to his wife.
Yeah. And they met at Tesla, by the way, too. I think she was in the HR department.
That's correct. Yeah.
For those of you interested in the video, if you go on YouTube, the title of the video is "The Quiet Engineer Behind Tesla's Success." And by the way, JB owns 2 Tesla Roadsters. One of them was actually a evaluation prototype. And what the team did was they typically destroyed the evaluation prototypes because they beat them up pretty badly. These are the cars they drive off a cliff to see what would happen when it crashed or drove it into a lake or whatever. This particular one was a vibration test Roadster. And so this would typically not have been put on the road, but what the team at Tesla did was they thought so highly of JB, they actually put this car together, made it safe, and presented it to him as a gift. I think it's brilliant yellow.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Then that brilliant yellow, that would be just about the closest color to the T0 that you could find.
Yeah. Yep. And the last conversation I had with JB, he had in that car one of the first ESS battery packs for the Roadsters. I don't know if it's still in there or if he's upgraded since then, but
I don't know. That's a good question.
But if you're watching, JB, let us know. Is that battery pack still in there, or have you replaced it since? If it's still in there, that would be remarkable, because that makes it 15 years plus since this was a EV, or the evaluation prototype. That would have been 2006, 2007 timeframe.
Yeah, possibly even sooner. I've seen rumors of evaluation prototypes that were out as early as 2005.
All right, so it looks like we've got a question. Instagram, Adriano Bordignom says, schematics are available, or you guys were forced to draw yourself under reverse engineering? A combination of the two. What we found is that people in the community, the Roadster community, and it's a small, close-knit community, also filled with some ex-Tesla people, is a very generous group of people, especially when they recognize a company like us is fighting hard to keep the cars on the road. So we were given a few gifts along the way, none of which I can disclose because there were NDAs, and those usually protect intellectual property. We have also done an enormous amount of work over the years doing reverse engineering and creating our own schematics, test points, wiring diagrams, drawings, and are continuing to do so. Our most recent push is for developing bench testers for the various electronic modules in the Roadster. It's one thing to work on a Tesla Roadster and work on the electronic module while it's in the car, in its environment, receiving signals. But in some cases, that's very difficult, almost impossible to do. For example, behind the steering wheel, you have your dash, of course, and underneath that dash is what's called a switch pack. And this is a circuit board that essentially does all the heavy lifting switching for high current. So you can have a tiny little switch that flips on your wiper motor, for example, which draws a number of amps, or your headlights. This board is beginning to manifest problems as it's aging. There are a bunch of MOSFETs on that board, and because it's 15 years old, there are failures occurring. And working on those in the environment is very difficult because you have a windshield here, you've got probes that you're trying to insert on the board, and you can't quite see it. So what we're developing is benchtop testers and load banks for these types of modules, which will then allow us to take it out of the car, replicate the environment, and be able to troubleshoot in a temperature-controlled environment out of the car on a lab bench.
That's and that's such an important thing for you guys, for the guys to be able to do, because a lot of times you're going to be forced to pull these boards out in order to do the changes in the chips.
Mm-hmm.
And putting the board in without testing it could cause all kinds of system failures and system problems.
Right.
If something had not been right. So you really have to have a way to test it outside the car.
Yeah, and that's where the load banks come in, of course, replicating the actual loads that are in the car, proving that it can operate. And a good example of that is we had an APS unit.
Mm-hmm.
The APS unit is a DC to DC converter in the Tesla Roadster that takes the 400-volt string voltage on the big main battery and converts it down to 12 volts so that you can operate your lights and locks and VMS and all of that. Well, we repair these on the bench, but we didn't have a proper load test for this. So we put it back in the car, and it's an act of Congress to get these batteries in and out, the 1,000-pound battery.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
So we closed it all up, got it up in the car. Everything was running fine. I was test driving, and on the way home one night, I went to test the AC, and I turned that on, and the car quit right in the middle of the road there. Now, here I am, 3 lanes of traffic, right? Rush hour. And the car won't budge. Now, with an ICE engine, you have some tricks. You can use some ether to start the carb, or pour some gas down in the carb, whatever, or you can get a jump. But with this Tesla Roadster, there isn't much you can do if it's dead right in the middle of the road. So anyway, it turns out that there's a crowbar problem, and the DC to DC converter we repaired can only handle a certain amount of current, and then it shuts down. So fortunately, once I took the load off, it recovered, and I was able to get it home. Now, had we had the proper load banks and tester on the bench, we could have replicated all of the conditions that this thing goes through inside the car, inside the battery pack, right?
Right.
And we would have avoided that. So we are on a quest, and we are building these types of testers and load banks. And you know what we do? We share this stuff with Tesla. Originally, it was a lot of pay it forward without any recovery, right? But the pay it forward philosophy says that if you do a pay it forward, you'll eventually get something back or more than you gave. The law of karma, for example, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So we share this type of information with Tesla, and they're appreciative, and there are gifts that come our way from time to time as a result of this kind of generosity that now goes both ways.
You know, I know this is just my own opinion. We don't have anything to verify it, but I still think that a lot of what goes on with Tesla supporting the Roadster community today has come as partly because of these pay it forward type activities.
Mm-hmm.
We are constantly talking to Tesla, telling them what's going on, sharing with them the things that we're learning, telling them about customers that maybe haven't talked to them in years but have come to us. And I think it raised visibility to the right levels inside the company to say, we still have a customer base and we still need to do something with this.
It's been a great partnership. And like you said, our Census program, for example, showed Tesla how many of these cars are still out there in play.
Yeah.
And can we just walk away from it and say, well, the product's end of life, just upgrade to a Model 3 or a Model, whatever Model Y. But
not only did you successfully show Tesla that they've got still 2,000 cars out there on the road and the people driving them, that it's a vibrant marketplace because of the sales of the cars going back and forth, and it's an incredibly passionate group of people.
So. Yeah.
They're probably the most passionate EV owners that I've met so far. And that has to harken back to what Elon saw when the EV1 was being distributed.
Yeah. And of course, the level of indebtedness that Tesla feels toward the original Roadster owners is very powerful, because here were guys that were buying these cars for $100,000 plus with a company that was inches away from bankruptcy, not knowing they would ever even get their car. But they were passionate early adopters of the whole emission-free transportation, and they were willing to gamble and take that risk and help Tesla get started.
Well, and a decent new car today is going to run anywhere from $30,000 to $50,000. A decent new car in 2008 was like 15.
Yeah, right.
So you want to take that into effect. These guys are paying $100,000 to $120,000 on a car, and if you translate that $2,008 to $2023, it's the $250,000 Roadster that you have here in 2023.
It looks like Herbert Buder is joining us on YouTube from Germany. Welcome, Herbert.
Welcome.
I'm going to be there in actually Friday this week. Yeah. He says, hi, guys. Coming in late, but see your podcast later on YouTube. Always interesting discussion and new things to learn from me. Thank you, guys. Well, you're more than welcome.
Glad that you joined us. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So we've got a picture we can pop up here. It's called the Delaware Tesla Club. And this is continuing the saga of the world-traveling Roadster VIN 507, Raphael de Mestre's car. It circumvented the globe in 2012. Took 127 days to do it. The goal was to do it in 80 days because of that movie, I think, Around the World in 80 Days.
So.
Yeah. And it won a number of awards and milestones, winning the first EV race around the world in a standard electric vehicle, being the first man to drive alone around the world in an electric car, making the fastest electric vehicle circumnavigation around the world ever, 127 days, and making the longest drive in a standard electric car, 28,282 kilometers. Well, VIN number 507 got bricked in Munich, and Raphael actually showed me what the problem was. There was a reset button on one of the charge cables, and the second team at the Munich Museum did not realize that had tripped.
Oh.
All they needed to do was hit that reset button, and they would have continued to charge it.
And that's probably the little GFI reset button on the plug on the yellow cord that goes to the charger, right?
It was a European equivalent of that. Yes, it looked a
Okay.
bit different.
Okay.
So hundreds of thousands of people came to see this Tesla Roadster at the Munich Museum, and that's why they asked for an extension. It was 1 year originally, then they asked for another 6 months. It was during that 6 months that it got bricked. So Raphael reached out to us years later and said, my car's dead. I'd like to take it around the world again. And we worked with Tesla, and we got them to commit to creating a fast track replacement battery for this car. But he had to get it to the United States. So he ended up putting it emission-free on a sailboat that had an empty cargo on the way to the colonies.
Right.
And it was going to bring coffee on the way back, right?
Right.
And this was a true sailboat because we realized that it was delayed by 2 weeks because the winds were unfavorable. And I thought, well, why don't they just fire up the diesel engine? There was none. This was a true emission-free clipper ship. So it hovered around Cuba for 2 weeks until the winds became favorable, eventually went to Miami, and then it came cross-country on a diesel transport. Unfortunately, there were no Tesla semis available yet, or we would have tried to get one of those. So to replicate the trip, by the way, it came here. We got the battery installed in cooperation with the Tesla Tempe Service Center, and shout out to Tesla for everything they did. We then upgraded the Roadster, rebuilt the power electronics module, weatherized a bunch of components in there because this car wasn't going to be sitting in a garage, and upgraded the brakes as well.
Yes.
Much safer. Now, what Raphael wanted to do was replicate the trip from Miami. So he drove it all the way from Phoenix back to Miami. And now he's going to go north. He's in Delaware right now. He's going to go to Nova Scotia. Then he's going to go across the United States again. He's eventually going to end up in Seattle at Carl Medlock's shop. And from there, he's going to go across the ocean with it again and start this trip around the world.
And in fact, I think the starting point, well, I'm not sure if it's an official starting point or not, but it is Miami, because when they're done with the trip around the world, they're going to actually end up in Miami again. They're going to get the cars. And in this picture, I assume this is a recent picture.
It is. What we have here, let me explain. This is the Delaware Tesla Club, which invited Raphael to join them, and they had a special meeting and took him out to dinner, it looked like, from the pictures I've seen. They showed 2 Tesla Roadsters in the front. The rest are all later model Teslas from the club, but you can see all the club members. And it was the president of the club is Viviana van Derlen. She's one of our early customers, and she's standing there in the front with that red maroon top. And Raphael is standing to her right next to VIN 507.
Fascinating. This is going to be a fun story for us to continue to monitor as Raphael makes his way back across the United States. Now, when we talked to Raphael, if I remember right, he told us he was going to Nova Scotia specifically because on their first trip around the world, they had gone through Nova Scotia and they had planted a tree there. So he's going back to visit the tree that had been planted, and from there is going to make his way across the United States, actually come south to San Diego, where they had planted a tree in the United States, and then up to Seattle.
And they're actually taking core samples of the trees and probably turning them over to a lab to test for pollution or some sort of thing like that. Raphael is very much into not just emission-free, but also into planet-saving initiatives. And it looks like our social media team is lighting up here. They want to say something. Go for it, guys.
That's right, Pete. So we had the opportunity to document his first time seeing the Roadster in, 7 years? I think it was 7 years.
Exactly.
Seeing the Roadster and sitting in it and getting to drive it again. We also got to document the very beginning of his journey across the United States. We'll be releasing a video tentatively Friday on that.
This Friday. Okay, excellent.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, keep an eye out for that. It is a very special car, a very special Tesla, and of course, a very special Roadster. You too, Pablo Damon says, the men at Gruber articulate quite well. Well, thank you for that compliment.
Thank you.
Yeah. I've got another picture for you guys to throw up. This is a picture called number 1. And our Gruber Motor Company team always amazes me. They now have an in-house capability to do decals, and things like you see here, letters. So what I did was I threw this out on Facebook, and I said, okay, guys, this is Roadster community. Challenge us. There's all kinds of things we can do with this capability. Let us know what you'd like to see us provide for you. So immediately, one of the owners came back and showed us a picture. And if you guys can throw up fob decal. Or actually, it's fob logo. Let's go there. Yeah. There is a little Tesla emblem on the key fobs. That's not it. It's a fob logo without the two. That's the finished product. So we're jumping ahead of here a bit. So one of the owners said, I would like to get the T replaced on my key fob. And I showed it to Victor, and he looked at it and he said, wow, that's really small, but let me see what I can do, because she's missing one on one of our other keys apparently. Now you can go to fob logo -2. And there you can see what he created. Did you delete it? He says that in order to apply this, you're going to need a pick or a small pair of tweezers, because you have to align it properly. And so anyway, he was able to replicate this. We're a generous company, so any of you that need this, send us an email at ev@gruber.com. We'll pop one of these or two of these in the mail for you, and we'll send it to you free of charge, so you can replace your key fob logo. On a different note, these key fobs, we have not solved the problem of a supply for those yet. It's still murky who made them originally, and this is the Roadster community, by the way. If any of you want to chime in, if you have information, please do so, and we'll disseminate it. But apparently, we even went to Lotus. The original plant manager, Matt Windle, is still there. He said, yeah, I can help you guys with that. So he went out on a production line. He decided, I'm going to find this fob. It turns out he came back a few days later, and he said this was one of the parts, and there were a few, that Tesla decided to source themselves. And he has no idea where they got it from.
Wow.
I then checked with a 14-year veteran at Tesla who was in supply chain, and he wasn't sure either where they got that. He thinks the company may have gone out of business. So it would be nice if someone can actually find this fob, because as these things age, they become brittle, they break, and it would be nice to be able to replace that part.
I'm wondering, just my own speculation here, could we potentially use some of the key fobs that we have and find out what kind of frequency range that they operate in?
Yeah, that part we have.
Okay.
It's then the cost of developing a to replicate a product where all you need is one or a dozen.
Yeah.
The cost becomes prohibitive. Now you've got a $500 key fob, which no one wants to buy or pay for.
Yeah, and that is definitely true. I do remember. This is a number of years ago when key fobs were, I think we're a little bit simpler. Go to my son's preschool. I'm going to pick him up. We have our family van. I click on it, and you tweet. But it wasn't just the van, my van. It was the van next to me.
Right, security was missing. Yeah,
and sure enough, I locked my van. The van next to me locks. I unlocked my van. I'm thinking, wow, I'll bet that key is the same key too.
Yeah, this Tesla Roadster key, by the way, is definitely a hybrid from the old school. It's a combination metal key and a electronic fob assembly, which does a number of things. One, it'll open your trunk, it will lock and unlock your car.
I wonder. I wonder if there are any key fobs anywhere in the marketplace that could approximate that.
That would be great. So for those of you that saw that picture earlier, again, we have the capability to do small decals like this and the large ones. Remember the ones on the side of the Tesla Roadster? Well, you may want one that has your name on it rather than Tesla. We can do all of that. So just, again, like we said, challenge us, and we will quote you a price on the larger ones and see if we can make those for you. By the way, just below the Tesla Roadster door sill there, that is a carbon fiber version of the door sill. Now, I don't recommend that you do this on a collectible Roadster because originality is everything. But here's a great idea. If you have one of those collectible Roadsters And like I have, number 5, it
Yes.
says Signature 100. It would be great if I was able to take that off, preserve it, if I ever sell the car, and put one of these carbon fiber versions on it to put something in its place and protect the door sill.
Sure.
So that would be one application for this. And of course, we can make it say anything you want. This is the general run-of-the-mill Roadster, but Signature 100, Signature 250, Roadster Sport, anything that you can conceive of, we can do. Just below that, by the way, you see the Prindle buttons. Those are for the 2.0 Roadsters, and they also call these elevator buttons. Those are also available, and for those of you that drive your car a lot, those are probably worn off and not looking like they did when they were new. With one of these overlays, you can actually return that look and feel to what it looked like when it was new. The R80 badge, by the way, to the right, while we have the picture up, those we did not make. Those came from Tesla. And what we're finding is that Tesla is beginning to replace some of these type of inventory items. You can buy these from your local Tesla service center. What our service manager recommends is drive down there and talk to them, because it's going to be tough to get through on the phone. You have the online methods of contacting them, which isn't going to get you to the parts department. So a drive down to visit your Tesla Roadster Service Center is one of the ways you can get this, including that Roadster Sport decal that goes on the power electronics module. We've seen a few PEMs that were replaced by Tesla that are missing this decal completely. So here's a way that you can replace it. And then finally, the hubcap centers down below. Again, let your imagination run wild and tell us what you want in the center of that, and we can replicate it and do that. All right, let's see what else we have here. If we can throw up a picture called Austrian Tesla. This is the Austrian Tesla Club that met in a Austrian village on a lake in the Alps called Hallstatt, H-A-L-S-T-A-D-T. And it is just a magnificent slice of heaven there in the Austrian Alps. If you back away, you can see there's a little farmhouse up on the side of the mountain there. And they're in the village square there. This is very common in old medieval Europe, especially in Bavaria, Austria, and Switzerland. You have your cobblestone streets. Then you have a fountain. And then you have a religious deity or a saint in the middle of the fountain. And by the way, I found this out the hard way. Some of these springs in these fountains are spring-fed.
Okay.
So you have crystal clear drinking water, and then others are recycled. And there's a little sign on the side that tells you that.
Ooh.
Well, one day
Oh, no.
I got a glass from a restaurant that I bought actually because I like buying beer glasses. And I thought, well, I'm thirsty. I dip in there and I start drinking. And someone comes over and tells me that's recycled and birds poop in this all day long.
Oh.
So there's a lesson. The fountains are not always crystal clear water. But anyway, in these little villages, it's not uncommon. You've got your local bakery. You've got a church there typically. You've got a castle at times, if it's a bit larger than this. And it's really like going back in time. Those buildings that you see there, by the way, are not 100 or 200 years old, which in this country would be, highly sought after and antique. These things are typically anywhere from 500 to 1,000 years old because of the history there. And some of these roads that you see, the cobblestone roads, were during the Roman times when they built roads throughout Europe.
Why don't roads last like that now? I swear there's always Phoenix construction going on.
I will tell you
Yeah.
why. There's a big difference. These are not manufactured bricks. This is not asphalt. This is granite from the mountainsides. And those things will outlast us. But anyway, I wanted to show you the Austrian Tesla Club had their event, and they stopped in Hallstatt. They did the mountain switchbacks after that, and in front is an insane green Tesla Roadster. There are, I think, 6 of those in Europe, and that is one of the wildest colors in the Tesla world, or the Tesla Roadster world.
Boy, that looks like a neon yellow. It
does. Yeah.
it's a really beautiful car. Now, did that person call you something like Americano or something like that when you drank out of the fountain?
No, they talked to me in German, and I speak German. So, but at that point, I had a decision to make: do I upchuck, or do I just simply live with it? And I decided, since I'm out in the public square, I'm not going to hack and cough and all that. I'm just going to tough it out and pretend that nothing ever happened.
Now, Pete, what is that green in the background on that? What is that, a Model S maybe?
I think it's a Model S, yeah. And it's probably a wrap because, the traditional, later Tesla colors don't go quite that bright.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's see what else we got here. If we can throw up a picture called Antenna. Short story here. We have a customer in the Midwest, lives on an island off the Lake of Michigan, off the coast of Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
And he was old school, and he liked a particular radio station. So what he did was, the upper left-hand image there is a picture of an antenna that was mounted on a Tesla Roadster. And as far as we know, it is the only Tesla Roadster that ever had an antenna mounted on it. If anyone wants to pipe up and prove otherwise, we'd love to hear from you. But because we are now in the information age and streaming audio is available, and Spotify, and
Sure.
you can get music through the internet, the antenna was no longer necessary, and it had some other body sins on it, like a luggage rack that wasn't properly installed. So we ended up doing body work on this car, and he asked us to close off the antenna hole. So at this point, it looks like the only Roadster in the world that had an antenna is now antenna-less, and all Roadsters now do not have an antenna. I'm not showing the finished product here, but rather than paint this car, which was an option, the customer elected to have it wrapped. And he had it wrapped in a color in between sterling silver and the other darker gray, thunder gray.
Okay.
So it's kind of in between. And but anyway, I thought you might be interested in the fact that there are no more Roadsters with an antenna on it.
And I do notice that particular Roadster has custom wheels as well. Those are not the typical Roadster wheels.
Oh, actually, those were one of the original wheels. Yeah,
They are.
It was they had the fond metal wheels, which were painted gray.
Okay.
And at one point, Elon said, after they had built a few Roadsters with these fond metal painted wheels, gray painted. We have one of those, by the way. They're now collectible because there's so few of them left.
Oh, sure.
He said, I want to see metal on these wheels. So they actually sent them out, had them reworked, and they exposed the metal portions on the wheel.
Oh, okay. Okay.
It's not the most favorite wheel on a Roadster. It was the 2.5 wheels that actually became, more in demand.
And those are the seven spoke wheels that we see so frequently.
Yes, exactly. Got another picture to pop up there, guys. It is I got a lot of pictures today, actually. It is the overheating picture. And we released a video about 6 months ago or so that advised customers that Roadsters will overheat in the summertime, especially the 1.5s. And we gave some tips and tricks and things that you can do to help your Roadster. I actually talked to Tesla just a couple of weeks ago or so, and I said, what's the story about the overheating Roadster issue? And the admission was, well, that was one of the design issues that we never quite resolved.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the Roadster buyers back in the day, the original 1.5 Roadsters, he said, were well-heeled, and they typically had environmentally controlled garages, so it wasn't that big an issue. And, of course, we weren't selling all of our Roadsters in Phoenix, Arizona, in the Gobi Desert.
Right.
So the problem was not as widespread as it could have been. But if you live in an area where you're getting 110 degrees, you're going to have problems driving your Roadster. I was test driving a 2.0 Roadster yesterday by the way, and it had just had a 3.0 upgrade. And typically those Roadsters don't have any heat problems. But this particular one, after about 20 minutes or so of test driving with hot asphalt, radiant heat coming off, and it was about 110 outside,
Mm-hmm.
eventually went into power limiting mode. And what that means is that the Roadster is saying, yeah, it's a little too hot for me. I'm not going to give you full power on the PEM. And sure enough, the PEM chart or the bar temperature chart had gone into yellow, from green or blue into yellow. You can still drive the car at that point, but it's not going to allow you to do the short, fast 0 to 60 in 4-second bursts.
Right. It's really trying to just preserve energy so that it doesn't heat up anymore.
Right.
You know, that YouTube video talked quite a bit about JB and the engineering challenges that he had when he was first creating the Roadster. They said cooling the battery pack it was first and foremost among the engineering challenges and ended up being one of their most difficult challenges to solve.
Yeah. You know, the first lithium or multi-cell lithium ion EV was actually the T0. It was the one that actually Martin Eberhard commissioned to have it converted to lithium ion. And the original lithium ion packs in that T0 were not they were not temperature controlled. So you ran the risk of overheating. And Tom Gage, actually one of the early founders or the owners of AC propulsion systems, used to drive a T0 as a daily driver. And it was in California, so he didn't reach the high temperature limits that we would here in Arizona. But
Sure.
I think in Arizona, that T0 would probably not have survived the same way. But yeah, you're right. JB points out that it was thermal management that was one of the big challenges in these multi-cell battery packs.
Yeah, by all means, they knew even then that if one cell in a 7,000 cell pack goes into a thermal runaway condition, that it's going to cascade, affect all the cells, and eventually cause the entire battery pack to catch fire.
And ignite the rest, yeah. In a Tesla Roadster battery sheet, you have two clamshells, upper and lower. In the lower clamshell, they inserted all 621 cells in a thermal potting compound that had a cooling, it's an aluminum cooling jacket that wraps and runs around every single row of 18650 cells. So you essentially have that level of thermal management in each of those sheets, and that's how they got around the potential safety issues of having thermal runaway with a lithium-ion pack.
Right, right. On TikTok, False Hopes has come into the show today and has a comment. First, good morning and welcome. He says, how often do Roadsters overheat in Phoenix? I heard it's going to be 118 there this week. Well, unfortunately, he heard right about the 118.
I have Tesla number 5 at home in my garage, and I'm not one of those well-heeled people that has thermal management in my garage or environmental control. So when it's 118 outside, my garage is typically 120. Well, Tesla number 5 doesn't like it. It sits there and it says, my BMB boards in the ESS pack are reporting too much heat, and I'm not going to let you charge until we can get that temperature down.
Right.
And there's a percentage rating typically. You're at 21%. You're at 44, and it goes on up. Well, anyway, in order to charge Tesla number 5 at home in my garage, I've devised a UPS fan, a squirrel cage fan, that I sit on top of that during the summer. And what it does is it moves air around the ESS pack, sufficient to where I can leave the yellow charge cable plugged in, and when it feels it needs a charge, it will charge. Without that, through the summers, I get to a point where I actually get so low I have to drive the car up to the shop here and store it here for the summer.
Wow.
I did bring it here yesterday, last evening, by the way, because we're going to be gone for 2 weeks, and I don't want to run the risk of a circuit breaker popping. You know how that goes.
Oh, yeah.
And then I've got a bricked car. But anyway, the 1.5 Roadsters, which is from VIN 1 up to 500, are more sensitive to heat problems. Some of the things that you can do to mitigate this is when you're charging your Roadster, charge it at night or time it so that it goes off during the coolest part of the day. Make sure that you open your trunk lid, because that's where most of the heat circulation is as it's charging itself. And by opening it, you create a much better a return on the hot air to allow cool air to come in. One of the customers up in Vegas right now has VIN number 13, and he did the same thing I did with a fan, and he's now able to charge his Roadster.
Yeah, I'm not surprised too, because the batteries, they're so deep inside the car that once they generate heat, the temperature in that battery and that few inches around the battery could go up pretty dramatically. So
Mhm.
I can see why that would be effective. And I mean, you could go to a place like Home Depot and get that same type of squirrel fan like you were talking about with the off the UPSs. They're a high volume fan, and they run about $60 or $70.
Right. The other things that you can do to help the temperature or to mitigate high temperatures in your Roadster is make sure that you change your coolant pumps on the 1.5 Roadsters. There's only one coolant pump. It's a 12-volt DC brush motor, and two things happen. The brushes wear down with age, and the bearings begin to seize up, or they represent some drag. So the downside now is that your gallons per minute is reduced. Those things should be changed every 5 years or so. It's cheap insurance. So that's one way. The second thing is make sure you check your coolant levels. There's a little tank in the right-hand driver's side where the battery pack is in your back or in the trunk area. And make sure that your coolant level is within tolerance. If you're seeing foaming, that means you're getting air and it needs some more coolant.
You know, the coolant levels is not just a Roadster issue. I know Model S's have coolant. In fact, virtually all electric vehicles in the marketplace today have coolant. Now, if you go down to your auto store, go down to your AutoZone, your O'Reilly's, your Shucks, you're as likely as not to go to them and say, hey, I have, such and such electric car. I need to get some coolant for it. And they'll say, well, that's an electric car. It doesn't need any coolant. It doesn't have a radiator. They're wrong. Most of these cars do have a radiator or something that approximates a radiator.
Right. One question just came in from EV Fan YouTube. He says, so is there a purpose to the nasty pink stuff that Sandy tore down after all? I don't know the thermal characteristics of the pink stuff, as that's all we know right now. But if you look at the portions that they removed, it is very porous. In other words, almost like spongy. It's got a lot of air pockets. In order to provide thermal management, you're going to need something very dense like what's in the Tesla Roadster with that thermal epoxy. So I don't think it was thermal that they were going after with that pink poly stuff. It was structural rigidity, because after all, it is a structural battery pack.
Right. There may be some thermal capabilities to it, but if you really want good thermal management, you're going to have something that's a little bit more robust.
Next question, George from YouTube. He says, who will be doing the show the next 2 weeks while Pete's gone?
I will be doing the show for the couple of weeks while Pete's gone. And over here, Richard is going to be my co-host on Tuesdays and Thursdays at least, and possibly on one or two of the Wednesdays as well. The general manager over at Gruber Motors, Victor, is agreed also to be a co-host for a couple of weeks as well on Wednesdays. Looking forward to telling some stories about what goes on over at Gruber Motors on those Wednesdays.
And that'll be the time for you that have Roadsters to bring your questions, because Victor is very much involved in the operations over there. And it'll be an interesting time for you. YouTube, Foster Henderson. How are you, Foster? He says, Pete, I know the answer for the key. When I got 996, I only had one key. I ordered 2 physical keys from you, and the Tyco store ordered the key fobs, and they programmed the 2 key fobs for me. There you go. Tesla comes through.
There we go.
Yeah. All right.
Foster, thank you so much. And we will follow up with you on that and get more information. That's been something that's been a bit of a bugaboo for us for a little while.
Yeah, and I should have clarified earlier, the physical portion of the key, the metal portion, in other words, that part we can replicate, and we found a source for that. It's the electronic portion or the fob portion behind it with the little circuit board in it. And by the way, for those of you that have those, change those batteries every year or so. You can pop that fob open and change that battery. Sometimes when people decide that the key fob's no longer working, it's their battery, and they don't realize there's a battery in there that just went dead.
Mm-hmm.
And keep them away from water. Some of the ones that we've repaired have had water damage, and that's usually manifested by corrosion inside on the boards.
Sure.
and oftentimes we can clean that up and fix those for you.
You know, one of the questions that we haven't seen come up here yet, and I'm a little bit surprised on, so I'll go ahead and ask it. What's the update on the China Roadsters?
China Roadsters. Okay. I'm going to get into it just a second. Foster, if I believe that you're part of that Delaware group, if I saw that correctly on Facebook. If that's the case, let us know what your experience was with taking Raphael out to dinner and what you thought. And while you're doing that, I'm going to work into the Tesla Roadsters in China. Just spoke with the sellers this morning, and here's the latest. Let's see if I can find that here. There we go. All right. So the new sea containers, and remember, they had to move the Roadsters from the original sea containers that they were renting for 13 years. Huge bill, by the way, into 6 figures. And they had to move them into their own sea containers, which was done last week. And we have some pictures out on the listing that show you that whole progress.
Now, I know that the owner had talked to us about trying to buy the original sea containers that the Roadsters had been contained in. Obviously, that was unsuccessful since they were going through the process of moving them.
Yeah, for whatever reason, it was unsuccessful. So now they have their own sea containers. The cars have now been relocated into those sea containers. And as of the 16th, or today, they're going to be loaded onto the ship. The 16th, the ship departs, and it's on its way to Long Beach. It's going to be on the ocean for 35 days. And then once it arrives in Long Beach, they may require some customs issues. And one of them was, and they're not sure about this yet, they may have to wash the bottom of the cars because they're concerned about the cars being driven and picking up dirt from a foreign country that could deposit contaminants on U.S. soil. Now, this is how custom works, all right?
Yeah.
Not that any of us agree with any of this, but hopefully they're going to be able to tell them, look, these cars have never been on the road. They have been in these sea containers for 13 years. There is no road, mud, dirt, grit, or grime underneath these cars.
I mean, I would think they could even say, hey, look, guys, these cars have more U.S. dust on them than they have China dust.
Good point, yeah. So if customs prevails, however, they're going to have to pressure wash the bottom of the cars, which will delay it a few days.
Okay.
But from there, they are going to go on to overland transport. We were thinking rail originally, but it looks like just semis would be easier. So we'll have 3 semis heading toward Phoenix, and they will then be taken off the semis. They'll be in our secure compound, in our storage area, and we're going to have a second barn find opening.
That's going to be fun. And it looks like it's going to be somewhere around that last week of August. I know that we get Gruber Power Services gets materials, and Gruber Industries as well. We'll get materials from China on the boats, in the sea containers. Usually it takes about 7 days or so for those sea containers to work their way through customs. I'm thinking that it'll be probably around the same thing with the cars. That would put those cars here somewhere in the last week or so of August.
We plan on doing a big media event once these cars get here. We will, they are sealed currently in the sea containers, so we'll do a second barn find opening, and we'll invite big media and influencers. We're even talking about contacting Supercar Blondie. Those of you that might want to meet her, we'll see if we can get her here as well. And there was even some grumbling or mumbling about possibly having a mariachi band here with some balloons or something.
That would be a nice, fun touch of Phoenix for that, actually.
YouTube, Foster asks, he says, was Raphael's battery an R80 battery? No, I'm not in the Tesla, the Delaware group. Okay.
He's in the Northern Virginia group.
Yeah, Northern Virginia. Okay. Originally, Tesla's or Raphael's battery was a legacy battery, and it has just recently been converted to an R80 battery pack. And I think in standard mode, it was charging up to 230 miles or something like that. I think he's using range mode, though, in order to get maximum range because he doesn't want to stop as often to do the charging.
Right. Foster also follows up and says, Pete, I was part of the Mid-Atlantic Tesla group, but as we grew, I was split out and became part of the Northern Virginia group. I am also part of the Maryland owner group, so I know Val.
Oh, okay. All right. Excellent. Thank you for
Thank you.
for updating us. All right. Let's see what else we've got. So Electrek came out with an article, and they're talking about the NACS standard. And it doesn't really apply to Roadsters, you might think, but it does in some ways because Roadsters are able to charge from destination chargers. That's one of the things that Raphael is doing. First time around the world, he had to look for kitchen, circuit breaker panels, and a KOA campground. Nowadays, he can look for destination chargers, and with one of Henry Sharp's CAN Seniors, he's able to charge his Roadster. So the non-supercharger Roadsters are definitely ruled out. Or I'm sorry, the non-superchargers are the ones that you would charge with. The superchargers are ruled out because the Roadster won't do fast DC charging. So what Electrek lists here is we've got Ford, GM, Chevy, Cadillac, Aptera, Rivian, Volvo, Polestar, Mercedes. Those are the ones that have adopted the standard. Yeah.
This is so you guys have just heard a buzzing coming through the sound system, and that buzzing actually is probably some sort of a telemarketer or a spammer calling the phone that we use for Instagram.
Not realizing that we've got hundreds of people that we're streaming to, and he's disrupting that.
Yes.
What's he trying to sell us, Jesse? Does he say? Or you don't even want to talk to him?
Put him on speaker, Jesse.
Yeah.
Let's all have a conversation.
You know, I get so many sales calls every day. My first question is this a sales call? And you know what? 90% of them lie. Oh, no. But I want to acquaint you with blah, 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 right?
Yeah.
That's a tough way to make a living if you think about it. You know, I mean,
cold calling is not easy.
It's constant rejection.
Yeah, it takes a special person. You know, while we're waiting for Instagram to get back up, Foster Henderson does have another comment for us from YouTube. He says, I'd like to get Raphael's log for where he charged his car, because, man, that would be some good info for Roadster owners.
Roadster owners, yeah. You know, one of my questions to him, Foster, and I expected the answer to be yes. I said, did you ever get range anxiety? And he says, no. Yeah, do you remember that comment?
I remember that. I was totally surprised by that.
Yeah. And the other thing that he was amazed by was the generosity of people all around the world allowing him to use their electricity for him to charge his car. In fact, they were privileged that, you know, the world-traveling Roadster was actually going to, you know, use their kitchen or their circuit breaker panel or whatever. But yeah, Raphael, I think, got pretty good at electrical installations because opening these panels, he had to figure out, was it single-phase power, three-phase power, where's my 220 volt, you know, what's the voltage, which adapter do I connect to it?
Well, and a couple of things that he had mentioned in that interview that I thought were just fascinating was, first, he said, look, I could be driving in the middle of nowhere, but I'm going down the road and there's power lines right there on the road. So as soon as I see a transformer or a box or something off the power line, I know, okay, well, this is the place that I'm going to turn at for the night because they're going to have power.
Right.
And so he said that it was no big deal. The other thing that escaped me, obviously, most of the world runs on 220 volts. And so the United States is fairly unique in its 110 volt system. And so he was able to get the higher level charges because 110 volts here in the United States, your typical garage plug is going to be 110 volts, and it'll either be a 15 amp or 20 amp circuit. That means you're pulling 12 to 15 amps at 110 volts.
Right.
And it would take 36 hours to fully charge your car.
Right.
But across the world, most of these places were 220 volts, and they were 20 to 30 amps. And so he was able to easily charge his car overnight.
Yeah. And even if it was 220 at 15 or 20 amps, because of the reciprocal relationship between voltage and the amperage, he would be getting more power at 15 amps at 220.
Yeah, exactly. So even then, he was getting twice the power that we would have here in the United States.
So Foster says, I hear Pete's phone. LOL. Is it Pete's wife? You know, she does often call me during the podcast, even though she knows when the podcasts are and sometimes watches them even.
Yes.
She's on Instagram typically, so she doesn't get the green screen or what we put up on the green screen. All right, first sunglass question from TikTok. Dog Day 44. Welcome, and thank you for joining us. You must be new. The sunglasses, we are going to release a video soon that explains this thing with sunglasses, this fetish that we have, or this fad. But in the meantime, think about Neo on The Matrix. Think about the Blues Brothers. Think about the coolness factor that comes with sunglasses. Elton John, even wears sunglasses.
Elton John sunglasses, and it's
these guys are chuckling over. Come on, Elton John wears sunglasses.
I'll bet they're chuckling at your fetish comment, actually.
Oh,
yeah, that's more.
That's exactly what we were laughing about, Pete.
All right.
Yeah, it's not that we've been drinking. It's still morning here. We're not drunk. We've had all kinds of interesting theories posed.
And we're not aliens with laser eyes that would blind our population or our the audience. But,
yes, my name is not Scott. I'm not one of the X-Men.
No.
Neither is he.
So Instagram, Solid22 Masri says, hi, welcome. Thanks for joining us. By the way, when you're telling us where you just tell us where you're coming in from, too. We get people from all over the world, and it's always fascinating when you see Australia, Kenya, South America. Russia, we even had Russia, I think.
Yes, we have had.
Yeah, a couple of months ago.
Yeah, so we love hearing where you're from.
Mm-hmm.
AMR Vista 1, also on Instagram, says good morning, and good morning to you as well. And then Josh Rush, 81 on Instagram, says, I have 110,000 miles on my Model 3 and going strong. I'm not surprised.
Good news. Good news.
Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that.
YouTube, Wayne Levitt says, my Hyundai key fob went through a full car wash cycle in my overalls pocket. The car was locking and unlocking for a half an hour, right? The fob worked perfectly forevermore. My wife does the laundry, and you wouldn't believe what she leaves in my pockets wait, she may be watching. I better not go down that path, right? Sorry, Natalie. I take it all back. TikTok, MR says, how much money for a Tesla battery? Oh, for the Roadster battery, it's $30,000. Now, that may seem like a exorbitant amount, based on what the Tesla Model S battery is at $22,000.
Mm-hmm.
But let's remember, this is a car that is virtually obsolete. You can't get any of the electronics anymore. They're hand making these batteries. They don't have robotics. They are actually wire bonding, 6,831 bonding points times 2. And you have all of this hand assembly, putting the clamshells together and the thermal potting compound. We would love to compete and do an aftermarket version of that, but we've run the numbers every which way from Sunday, and we can't even get close to $30,000 when you put a spreadsheet to it.
We've looked at the labor, and just the labor alone for us would be well above that $30,000 mark.
Right. Foster, who owns a Roadster, by the way, Foster Henderson, says, Pete, can you guys come up with an air filter so we won't need to do yearly service for PEMS, for the power electronics module? We looked at one, and actually Raphael's car had a screen on the squirrel cage fans, and all that really did was prevented the large twigs and leaves from getting inside there, but the dust still gets through there. With a filter arrangement, it would have to be somewhat accessible because to keep the cost down, you would want it to be owner replaceable rather than having to take it to a service center,
right,
which again drives your cost up. And it's like Martin Eberhard pointed out. He said, those scoops on the side were supposed to be functional and cool the PEM, but we never finished the design. And then remember the 12-volt battery that they decided they needed in the 2.0 Roadsters that didn't have in the 1.5s. They started looking around. They say, where do we have room to put a 12-volt battery? And the only place they could find was buried underneath a headlight, underneath the fender, the front right fender. There isn't a lot of room left on the Roadster to do stuff like this. Now, if people were willing to give up trunk space which is already very small. You can barely fit, like a golf bag in there.
Right.
And maybe some carry-on luggage, one, maybe two. If people were willing to give up that space, yeah, we could build a really cool filtration system that would allow a user to, like in your home, change it every 30 days, and you would get away from that yearly annual.
Well, one of the things that you just mentioned too, I think, is so memorable. It's not just the filtration itself; it's where that filtration has to be put, because that PEM draws its air from underneath the Roadster a couple inches above the road. That means it's going to be almost impossible for an owner to be able to service his own Roadster, even if we were able to get a very simple, like almost like the soft sponge filters that you can put in a lawnmower type of thing.
Right.
So I would love to see us be able to do that, but it's going to probably require more engineering than we have the time or resources to do.
And the final thing about that, Foster, although it's a great idea and it's been bandied about endlessly, as these cars go collectible, these types of modifications are frowned upon because of it changes its originality.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, that may be one of the things we end up living with in order to keep the cars increasing in value and continuing their collectability.
We've talked a little bit about the collectability of the Roadsters too, and they are, in the automotive world, they're kind of a unicorn. They're only 15 years old and they're already becoming collectible cars.
Yeah.
And that usually is something that doesn't happen for 30 to 50 years.
Right. Decades. Yeah.
It takes decades before a car truly becomes collectible, and these are not taking decades in order to gain that collectability.
Right. TikTok, Hammy92 says, have you heard of the Tesla Anti-Handbook handbook? I haven't.
I have not. I'd love if you could share some more information with us on that, Hammy92. We're always looking for more information.
So earlier we started to list the car manufacturers that have switched over to the NACS standard. By the way, we used to say NACS standard. I've been hearing NACS, so I think that's become the new buzzword. So I think it's okay to say that.
Yeah, I think so as well.
All right. So who has not joined yet? Volkswagen, in talks, they say. Kia.
Do you want this image up?
Yeah, let's do that. And then some commentary on your thoughts as to why some of these companies have not gotten on the bandwagon. BMW, Audi, Lucid, Fisker, Porsche, Toyota, Honda, Lexus, Hyundai.
Well, I know for Kia and Hyundai, both of those companies have said something to the effect of CCS provides higher voltage capabilities for charging. Some of the cars are starting to come out on the marketplace today with 800 volt charging capabilities, and it's essentially like a 350 kilowatt. And Electrify America also has that same thing. So to hear that Volkswagen is in talks tells me that there's a good chance that problem is going to get solved in the near future. If you recall, Volkswagen owns and maintains and is building out the Electrify America charging network.
Right.
That was part of their penalty for cheating on the diesel emission scandal a few years ago. Many of those Electrify America chargers do produce 800 volt charging capabilities, and Electrify America has also announced that they're going to be moving to the NACS standard. So most of their chargers are going to end up with both CCS and NACS cables.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And why would you want to go higher voltage on your charging? Well, smaller wire size, smaller switch gear, so it's less expensive. Your circuit breakers, for example, now are half if you've doubled the voltage.
Yeah, well, and if you in the older Model S's, you could see the voltage and amperage coming into the car when it starts to supercharge. And it typically would max out at about 360 volts and 300 amps. That's why you have these tubes that are, an inch to inch and a half thick. Okay, well, if you're putting 800 volts in at 360 amps, now you're charging, instead of 175 miles an hour for charge, you're charging it 500 miles an hour for charge.
Mm-hmm.
And that great big battery can pick up 100 miles of range in 7 or 8 minutes.
Mm-hmm. So the real question then becomes, will the NACS standard be able to survive the transition to batteryless cars, which is what we've been predicting? It's carrying 1,200 pounds of DC storage around in a vehicle with you is archaic, and it may go away at some point in time. And this is usually where Jesse pipes up about fusion, and I put an article in there for you. There's a fusion generator yet.
Fusion, yeah. We need AI. We're going to skip our AI podcast for a little while, but that supercomputer that we were looking at earlier today is going to help us get to fusion quicker, I hope.
So you're saying that AI will be able to solve some of these tougher problems?
Yeah, the math that we haven't quite figured out, especially things like gravity,
Yeah.
So stuff like that would be nice to know.
Just one of the things, gravity.
Yeah, little things like that.
Yeah. TikTok, Hammy92 is telling us what this last question was about. He says it's worth looking up. It's about the how anti-corporate Tesla is, but contains quite toxic practices. Please Google it.
We will most certainly Google it. We'll find out more about it, and maybe even add that in and share it in the future podcasts.
Mm-hmm. All right. We're coming up on an hour and a half. Are there any final questions that anyone would like to ask?
Well, one thing, Mark, I don't know if you want to do the sunglass or thing, or if you want to wait until Pete gets back from his vacation. I don't have the product quite launched on the website yet, but I think, it's up to you.
You see, we're going to go ahead and do that sunglass thing. I'm going to have to dig just a little bit through this, but Pete, we know how much you like your sunglasses.
Mm-hmm.
And of these various sunglass cases, and there's one in specific that I'm looking for, we have a founder series. You're the founder of Gruber Motors, and so founder series 001 is your sunglass cases.
Well, thank you. I appreciate
So
that.
we've had them here for a little while. We are going to be selling them on the website.
We want you to take that to Europe and show it off.
But yeah, please take
excellent.
that to Europe, show it off. We actually took, when we engraved the sunglass cases, we had a Founder Series Tesla Roadster. And so we took a picture of the Founder Series graphics and then laser engraved that exact picture onto the sunglass case.
It's the same font.
It
It's
is.
got it's got the picture of the logo on it. Yeah. Well, thank you very much. So 001. Well, I feel like Elon Musk with Tesla Roadster Founders #1.
That's right.
Thank you
That's
very
right.
much.
So we hope that you have a most wonderful trip to, I believe you're going to Germany and to southern France and visiting family. And so look forward to hopefully getting some video clips from you that we would share on the podcast while you're out and about. And then once you get back, you'll be welcome back, obviously.
My videographer's son Max is coming with me, so I'm sure there will be some TikToks in that and some videos
fantastic.
while we're there. And I'll definitely watch the podcasts while I'm there, if my computer works properly there, that is.
Yes.
And real quick, I'm going to see if I can pull up a couple pictures of these things. One second here. All right, so should see these. Hold on, what's going on here? Okay, there we go.
Yeah, okay. And so these will be for sale on the Gruber Motor Company website, is that right?
Yeah, we've got the
That's
template
correct.
built out, and we're just verifying the last few things, and I'm hoping we'll get those launched maybe later on this week. Yeah, we got the images and all that stuff ready to go. So
We know that the first 100 people who buy the sunglass cases, they're available in the burgundy red leather like that, as well as a brown, a blue, and more of a red leather, a pebbled red leather like that one there that's on the page. They're going to be for sale. The first 100 buyers are going to get the signature series. That's going to be a limited series sunglasses case. And then we will occasionally create Founders Series cases for people such as podcast guests or ones that we want to give away to. Never know. Maybe Elon or Martin Eberhardt might end up getting one of our Founder Series cases as well.
Very cool. All right. George is asking a final question on YouTube. He says, will Pete be visiting Germany's Tesla factory while on vacation there? You know, everybody asks that. We're in southern Germany. The Gigafactory's up in Berlin. It's way north. And we're down in Bavaria in the Alps, the lakes, the rolling hills, the Sound of Music type scenery. And very brief stay there because my brother lives there. And when they go on vacation, they want to get away from there. Although I'd love to stay there because it's it's just a beautiful part of the world. So we're going to be going to the south of France, the Dijon region, Burgundy region, and we've got a bed and breakfast there. Foster Henderson has a question. Can mine say 996 for my car?
Absolutely, Foster. We're going to be able to engrave what people want on their sunglass cases. Some people have talked about having their entire VIN number put on the back, or some people have talked about just having the last 4 or the last 3. So yes.
So Evie, I would say email us, Evie at Gruber, or do our live chat on our website. Either way, we can get custom designs for you.
By all means.
There's one final question. It's a little bit low, guys. If you can pop it up, I can read it. TikTok. Josh says, I more life music, blessing. Okay, well, thank you. Foster Henderson says that Dresden is nice. It is, yeah. You know, there aren't any real non-beautiful places in Europe, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, from the Mediterranean coast to, you know, even inland, the UK, the greenery, Ireland, you know, I mean, it's just, there's such a varied topography there and landscape and the cultures. And the food, guys, if you're into food, that's the first thing I'm looking forward to is enjoying some of that food, especially in southern France with the baguettes and the cheeses and the fine wines. And yeah. But anyway, the team here will take good care of you while I'm gone. I will chime in if I can. And yeah.
And also keep an eye, like you said, on TikTok because he might be going live and doing some just kind of impromptu stuff. So
yeah. Well, thank you for joining us today. It's been a pleasure, and we'll see you next week, Tuesday then, right?
We'll be next week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday?
Sorry, Wednesday,
No.
yeah. That's Thursday. Yeah, who's your guest?
So we haven't got a guest lined up yet. We've got some people we're still waiting on responses for. But we have Kyle Connor, we have Tesla Boomer Mama, and we have a couple other ones that are still tentative, but no firm dates yet.
Right, okay.
So as of right now, I'll be with you on the next podcast tomorrow, 10 a.m. Pacific time. We've got Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of next week as well, and look forward to it. Pete will definitely miss you. Hope you have safe travels and a wonderful time.
Thank you, everyone.